Everyone, this is Emily with Canix's product team, and today we're going to go through a process of creating inventory for our beginning upload into Canix. This template should be available to you to be able to copy and enter any of the information that you have for your facilities. And if you have more than one license, you can either create a copy of this per license, or you can add all information into one file and make sure that you enter the facility license number correctly for each set of inventory. As we go through these tabs, your licenses might not apply to all of these tabs. For example, you might not have a cultivation license, and therefore you don't need to pay attention to the plant batches or plant sections of this training. Let's get started with locations or rooms in your facility, as those are applied to all plant batches, plants, package, and non-cannabis inventory. Anywhere that one of these objects is being held in your facility needs to make sure that it has a location or a room in Canix that matches that. When you come up with the naming convention for your rooms, you can be as granular or as high level as you would like, but just keep in mind that when you do have an audit from the state, they're going to be looking at that location and the tag numbers associated with that location in the system and making sure that those match physically. Therefore, we recommend having more of a general hybrid name, which might be something like Flower Room 1, Row 3, which could contain multiple tables or zones within that row, rather than having something so granular like Zone 1, Row 1, Flower Room 1. This allows us to have a little bit more flexibility as to where that plant is in the row, but also allows us to find the plant easily by going to that particular row and seeing the inventory on hand. We can enter something like greenhouse or the building number in the parent location under column C to have that hierarchy to determine where in our facility that particular piece of inventory is. For our facility license number, we'll enter the license that this location should be created in. If it is available in multiple licenses or in multiple facilities, then you'll want to make sure you repeat this row and enter the facility license number for each row that that location applies to. Optionally, you can also add square footage and number of lights for these locations, and those are available to you in reporting for things like yield reporting or just cultivation reporting in general. These locations are going to be used in all steps moving forward, so make sure that you've entered them here first before we move forward. Moving on to strains, strains are used in plant batches, plants, and it can also be applied to items that you use in your packaged inventory. Your strain name in column A should be whatever you want to call this on your label or in your facility so that you have this information within reporting as well as physically on hand. If you have this strain in multiple licenses, you'll want to make sure that you repeat this row and enter the license number for each row that this applies to. Or, like I said at the beginning, if you have a different file for each license, just make sure that you copy that license number down through all of the rows. In column C, the testing status options are in-house, none, or third party. This is just to set up your strain initially, but it does not have any bearings on your package testing. So when you do your package testing in the end, you can do it any way that you would like to. This is just to set up your initial strain. In most cases, customers will select none for all of these rows. The last required fields are indica and sativa percentages, and these must add up to 100%. It's hard to determine that a strain is 100% one or the other anymore, or what the exact percentage is, but you can just determine whether one is more indica or sativa leaning through this percentage. Some optional fields that you have available to you here on the right are the THC and CBD levels. These are just averages that you can add to your strain to determine how these generally test, but the actual test results are going to be done on your package inventory. Additionally, you can select which strains you want to cross, and these strains must first exist in column A in order for you to select these strains in column I. Lastly, if there are any notes that you want to apply about this strain, you can go ahead and add them here, and this will be available to you in your strain table to reference. Now that we have our strains here, we're going to use those strains and the locations that we created in the first step to create our first set of plant batches. Plant batches are a collection of immature plants before you reach the vegetative stage. This will be either assigned a tag number or a plant batch name. And if you're doing a name, the naming convention is generally related to the strain and the date that it was planted. If you're using one file for multiple facilities, make sure you're specifying the correct license number for each plant batch in this table. Or if you're doing this for just one license at a time, make sure you copy that facility license number down across all of your rows. Next, you have the option to select clone or seeds for what this planting was created from. In most cases, it's coming from a clone, and you'll select that from the dropdown here. Next, you'll select from your list of strains on the Strains tab to determine what strain this plant had. You'll select the location or room that this was planted in. In this case, I only had one location on my Locations tab, which was Storage Room 1, but here you would probably have Clone Room or Mother Room or whatever particular room this plant was in. As you enter the number of immature plantings for each plant batch, you'll specify the number of plants that are currently on hand within that batch before they've reached the vegetative stage. If you do have any plants in the vegetative or flowering phase, then you'll want to enter 0 as the number of immatures, so we can reference this plant batch as we create our vegetative and flowering plants. You do not want to enter the number of vegetative or flowering plants in this field, only the number of clones or immature plants that you have remaining. The planted date is the date that that plant went into the ground. The lot ID is optional here to determine a group or collection of plants across multiple plant batches. For example, if you have the same strain that was planted on the same day, but across multiple locations, they might be given different plant batch names, but the lot ID will be referenceable to show that they were all part of the same lot or collection. You can also add notes here to determine what is happening to this plant at this moment. But you can add these at a later point as you go through and manage your plant batch inventory as well. Let's move on to plants where we'll add our vegetative and flowering plants for each of these plant batches. In our plant section here, you'll start with either a 12-digit tag number for all states other than New York or a 16-digit tag number for New York. If you don't already have tag numbers on your plants today that match this format, then you can go ahead and start with tag number 1 in column A and count up from there. For the facility license number, if you are creating this across multiple facilities, make sure that you're matching the correct number of tags to the right facilities with the right strains so that you have the correct inventory on hand. Moving on to the strains, you'll select from the list of strains that you created on the Strains tab in column C, and you'll select from the list of locations that you created on the Locations tab in column D. For both vegetative and flowering plants, you'll enter the date that it moved from immature to vegetative, and you'll select the plant batch that that plant is a part of. Again, going back to the plant batches table, this particular plant batch had 0 immatures in it because we already have our plants in the vegetative phase. If this plant was also in the flowering phase, then we'll enter the date that it moved from vegetative to flowering, and Canix will automatically mark it as a flowering plant. If this is a mother plant or a plant that will be used to create clones in the future, then you can enter true, but you can always make this change or designate this as a mother plant later as well. If it's not right now or you're not sure, you can also enter this as false. Optionally, you can add a lot ID. Similar to the plant batches, this helps determine the collection of plants that this vegetative or flowering plant was a part of. This can span over multiple plant batches over multiple locations, so this lot ID is more of a general code that kind of keeps these as part of the same batch or as part of the same harvest. And lastly, you can add any notes about these plants that you have on hand at the moment, or you can add notes as you go through this process in Canix later on. Next, we'll move on to items, which we're going to use for our packaged inventory. Items are used on packaged inventory at each step of your process, from raw materials initially taken from harvest or brought in from another facility, to work in progress and finished good products. So this is not just the finished product name that you see on the shelf at the dispensary, but something that you'll be naming your inventory to easily identify what you have on hand. Some examples of item names include the strain and the type of inventory that it is, or as you get to finished goods, maybe even including the brand and the weight of that particular product. As initial raw material is taken from a harvest, you might have something like Blue Dream bucked flour or Blue Dream biomass to determine that that's not yet trimmed or sorted. As you go through the trimming and sorting process, you'll have things like A's, B's, and C's or trim to determine those. And your finished goods might include something like your 1 gram or half-gram pre-rolls, or 1 gram or 3.5 gram jars. We'll go through some extracted products and gummies in just a second, but to focus on more of our flour products here, we'll move forward with adding our item type. The item type is a category that you'll be assigning to each of these items to determine how much flour you have on hand versus how much shake or trim, as well as determining flour count or pre-roll item types. The list that you have on hand here might be slightly different depending on your state, but as you select the item here, this will determine whether it's weight-based, volume-based, or count-based. That more general item type category can also be broken down optionally into a subtype, which is a more granular category. And this is custom to however you want to name this particular field. Oftentimes, people will enter the type of material like A's, B's, or C's so that they don't just have all flour on hand, but are able to determine how many A buds they have on hand across all of their strains. Others will enter the size of material like the 1 gram jar or a ½ gram pre-roll, so they know how many of a particular size they've created or have on hand at a time. This also helps with sales to determine how much you've sold over time of particular sized products or particular premium products like A's versus B's. Each of these types also has a corresponding weight unit. So for count-based items, you'll be selecting each, and weight-based items, you'll be selecting any of your weight-based products here: grams, kilograms, milligrams, ounces, or pounds. If you do measure anything in volume, you also have those volume units available to you. The unit that you set here is not the unit that you have to use for every package. You can go ahead and use pounds or kilograms sometimes, but grams is going to be what is pre-filled as I've selected it here in all of my workflows that I use in Canix. For count-based items, I also need to specify how much each unit weighs or how much each cannabis was represented in that unit. For example, a 1 gram pre-roll took 1 gram of cannabis to create that pre-roll, so I would enter 1 gram to represent one each. My eighth jars take 3.5 grams of cannabis to represent that one each, so I'm going to be entering 3.5 grams here as my individual unit weight. Now, the actual cannabis that you use to pull into your packaged inventory to create this will differ, and you'll specify that when you actually create the packages. Moving on to some optional fields, you can optionally enter the strain for this particular product to see all inventory that you have over a course of Blue Dream or other strains. You'll also select an accounting inventory type: raw material, work in progress, or finished good. This is often used for the accounting team to determine what the value of inventory on hand is for each of these stages, but it's also helpful in the sales process to limit the search to only finished goods products available on sales orders. Optionally, you can add a brand here to determine what brand you want to apply to your packaged or finished good inventory. And you can add a SKU to your items, which will also appear on your if you use SKUs within your facility. There are a number of other fields available to you as well to add for additional reporting information or to assign on your labels, like ingredients, administration method, supply duration days, number of doses, serving size, or description. You can also add notes to your items, and this will be available to you in your items table to review at any point. Now let's go through a few examples of items for concentrate or edible type items. As we go through our process, we might either be purchasing bulk distillate or creating bulk distillate from our flour products, and we often differentiate that by the strain and call it bulk distillate here. The item type for bulk distillate is concentrate weight, and you can add a subtype of bulk distillate or something else that helps differentiate what type of concentrate this is from other types of concentrate. As I often weigh it in grams, I'll leave grams as my weight unit, and I don't need to enter an individual weight unit because it's not count-based. As I move through to create my products for gummies, I'll have things like my bulk gummies differentiated by the type of weight that it is, 5 milligram or 10 milligram. Those would be given edible counts because I'm now counting my edibles in eaches. They're just not fully packaged yet in my 10 packs or other size packages. It also allows me to add the subtype with the weight and the type of item, like 5 milligram gummies, so I can differentiate that from other types of edibles or other size of edibles. As these are count-based, I'll also need to specify the weight that's in these, whether I want to specify milligrams or grams as my particular individual weight unit. I'm specifying the amount of weight for one gummy each. As I go into the 10 pack of gummies, I'll specify the actual individual weight unit of those 10 packs, which would be 10 5 milligram gummies or 0.05 grams. Other things like vape carts that are turned from a distillate into a finished good product would be considered concentrate count. And a common subtype is often the size of vape that you have here, whether half gram or gram, to differentiate from other concentrate count items. The individual weight unit is the amount of cannabis to create that 1 gram vape, which in this case was 1 gram of distillate. As you go through these items, if you have any questions, please reach out to our team as these will be the basis of your packaged inventory. Let's move on to our packages section so we can use these items to create our initial inventory on hand. Packages need a package tag in addition to the item. Package tags are either 12 digits or 16 digits for New York. We often recommend adding a prefix that's related to your facility license number with a few digits that differentiate it from your other facility license numbers. That way, as you transfer your inventory across your licenses, you don't have any inventory conflicting with each other. If you have any questions on how tag numbers, items, and other information in this uploader are used, please refer to some of our training videos linked below that describe some of these fields a little bit more in detail. After we've assigned a package tag to our inventory, we'll also assign the item that we have from our initial items table. So from this selection, you'll only be selecting from items that you have entered already here on this items table, and then you can enter the quantity that you have on hand for that item. If that item is in multiple locations or came from multiple different batches, produced under different times or different conditions, purchased at different times, then you'll be separating this inventory into different package tags. So you might have multiple packages of Blue Dream A buds or Blue Dream plucked flower, as they might have come from different harvests or purchased at different times. The quantity that you have on hand will be entered alongside the weight units for that item. So if it's a weight-based item, make sure that you select grams or pounds, determining based on how you have that weighed on hand, or that you select each if it's a count-based product. The status of your inventory determines whether this inventory is available to sell, meaning you can add it to a sales order or to an outgoing transfer, or whether it's still being worked on. The available to sell status will allow that package to be added to a sales order or to a transfer, whereas in progress will allow that inventory to still be edited or converted into other types, but is not yet available to sell. So that indicates that you're still working on that inventory, but it's not yet final packaged and tested to go out. The last status of in quarantine can also be applied to your inventory for initial upload, which will restrict that inventory from being edited or sold at this time. At any point, you can change the status of your inventory in Canix to available to sell or other statuses, including custom statuses that you can create in the implementation process. When you create this packaged inventory, you'll also indicate what location or room that is in. So as you go through the drop-down here, you'll be selecting from the list of locations that you've added in the Locations tab. The package date is the date that that package was created or the production of that package was done. If you don't know the date that the package was created, then you can go ahead and put today's date. And moving forward, you'll be entering the date that you actually package your inventory. Optionally, you can also add the expiration date for this inventory. This is most commonly used for finished goods or goods that are leaving your facility for sale instead of raw materials or work in progress. You can also determine whether this particular package is going to a lab for testing, meaning the exact quantity that you have entered here is the full quantity that is going to a lab. In most cases, you probably have not already prepared your testing packages to go out to a lab, so you'll have false for all of these in most cases. At a later point in Canix, as you go through the implementation phase, you'll still be able to create packages to go to a lab for this inventory that you have on hand. It's just that the full quantity that you're uploading right now is not going to a lab itself. Optionally, you can also enter a production batch number, although this should be entered for anything that has tested results already, and this should match the lab results that you have on hand. This production batch number is also mentioned in our training video around items, package tags, and production batches. So if you have any questions, please refer to, as that will explain a lot more about how this field is used. Optionally, you can add an internal lot ID to your inventory to mention that this particular package is part of a collection of other packages that all came from the same production or same harvest, for example. Although this lot ID does not affect your test lineage like the production batch does. Go through your inventory, you can also assign a brand specific to this package, although the brand will be applied based on the brand you've assigned to the item on this package. So if it differs at any point, you can add a new brand. Otherwise, you can leave this blank as we'll pull the brand from the item. You can also add any notes that you have on hand about this inventory currently. but you can add notes at a later point as well as you go through your packaging process. Now that you have your packaged inventory complete, we'll move on to non-cannabis products. But if you aren't managing any non-cannabis products at this moment or don't have any on hand, you can go ahead and skip this process and move on to the next video where we'll upload this inventory. Non-cannabis products are used in bills of materials and can also be applied ad hoc to any of your packaged or plant inventory. This can include things like nutrients, fertilizer, gloves, or as well as your packaged and production inventory like labels, jars, sugar, or anything that you put into your formulation. If you don't already use a SKU to differentiate your inventory, then you can go ahead and leave the SKU field blank. They do need to be unique for each of your non-cannabis inventory products in each facility. So if you do already have a SKU or a product with that SKU created, then you'll need to change the SKU as you'll see here. If you don't already manage SKUs in your facility today, then I would leave this column blank and you can always go ahead and add a SKU at a later point. If you're sharing this particular inventory across all of your facilities or across a few facilities, then you'll enter all of those facility license numbers that are sharing that quantity in this. For example, if you have sugar being shared across all of your production licenses within the same facility, and you don't know how much sugar applies to one license versus the other, you can go ahead and add both of those licenses in this column so that they can pull from the same quantity of sugar. If you do know or have specific inventory for each facility, then you'll only enter one facility in this column. The units apply to the main units that you want to see in reporting or how you mainly purchase this inventory. When you go to actually enter the lots and the quantity that you have on hand, you can enter those as different units, but you'll want to make sure that the units are all within the same family. Meaning if you enter a count-based unit each here, all of the lots and quantities that you enter will have to also be in each. So if you do purchase anything like a jar of product, you're not going to enter that you have 5 jars on hand, but you'll enter the actual weight that you have of that inventory for how you're actually going to be deducting it, either milliliters or grams or whatever that inventory is being pulled as. If you have a count-based product, you'll also determine whether you want that count-based product to be able to be deducted in fractions. In most cases, count-based products cannot be deducted in fractions like jars or lids or labels. You can't consume a part of one of those. So you'll enter false here for all of those. For weight-based products, you do want those to be deducted in fractions or in partial consumption, so you can enter true for that. Next, you can optionally add a product category to each of your non-cannabis products to determine either what the use of that is for, or if you're packaging on behalf of other brands or other customers, you can determine that brand or customer packaging. This category does need to exist in Canix first, so follow the instructions to create product categories for non-cannabis products in your account before adding it here. Again, this can be added at a later point as well. You can always add this or update this inventory later. Select the location of where this non-cannabis product is held. This location also needs to exist in the facility and in the Locations tab to be able to select from here. And lastly, you can optionally select the par level for this inventory so that Canix can alert you as the quantity gets close to this par level. This determines the reordering point for what point you'll want to go and place another order for more inventory. Use these non-cannabis products to actually add our lots and quantities, but you may want to add this at a later point when you're getting closer to actually using the inventory so you can do a full audit of the quantity that you have on hand. And that way you don't make a bunch of changes physically to the quantity that you have on hand without making those changes in the Canix system as well. To get started, you'll select from the list of product names that you have that you've entered in the Products tab. You'll also enter the lot that you've received, whether you want to specify that as the date that it was received or the actual manufacturer's lot number. This lot number is going to be used if you are selecting a specific lot to use. Otherwise, Canix will deduct your inventory automatically using FIFO based on the date that it was received. So this lot can be general or it can be very specific if you're pulling from specific lots. You can enter the product barcode if you would like. This optional field will allow you to scan the non-cannabis products in some flows, but is not widely used across Canix at this time. This barcode does need to be 12 digits or less, so it cannot be a longer number than 12. When entering your vendors in column F, this field is required, but your vendors do need to exist in Canix before you upload your non-cannabis lots. That means that you'll follow the instructions in Canix to create vendors from your facility data and then reference that vendor name here in column F. You'll select from your list of locations from the Locations tab here in column G. And this is optional if you want to specify that this lot is in a different location from other lots or is in a different location from your non-cannabis product, but is not required to add to each lot. You can also add the cost of this lot. So this is the cost that you purchased for one unit, meaning if you have 1,500 milliliters on hand, you're adding the unit cost for 1 milliliter, not for all 1,500 milliliters. So you'll need to calculate what the purchase price was for the unit and divide it by the base units that you're deducting it from. The quantity that you have on hand is the quantity of that particular product. And again, it's not the number of bottles or containers that you purchased, but the actual units that you're going to be deducting from it. So if one unit or jar contained 1,500 milliliters or 1,500 grams, you're going to enter that raw unit, 1,500 milliliters or grams in the quantity here. Lastly, you'll enter the received date that you received this product for. As Canix deducts this inventory using FIFO, first in, first out, we'll be using the oldest received date to pull inventory first and the newest received date last. If you don't remember exactly when your inventory was received, you can go ahead and enter today's date, and you'll be entering the dates moving forward more accurately as you bring in your inventory. Now that we've completed all of our initial beginning data for our template here, we're going to move on to our next video, which is uploading this inventory into our facility. If you have any questions as you go through this, please talk to your implementation manager or our support team to help you walk through these a little bit more in depth and understand your concepts more fully.